In a quiet village on the edge of the kingdom, a girl named Sella lived with her mother and younger sister. Sella was 18, quiet, and often lost in dreams. Her heart held one secret wish, to marry Prince Darien, the king's only son. He was everything she thought herself not to be, rich, handsome, admired. Sella, on the other hand, was plain, with crooked teeth and a nose she often tried to hide behind her long brown hair. Her beauty wasn't the kind that turned heads, but she had a gentle soul. Her life changed the day her father died. His passing left their family in deep debt, and her mother Lyra had only one choice, to remarry. "We need a man to save us," Lyra said one morning, staring out the window. "I won't let this family drown." Sella didn't argue. She only hugged her little sister, Gina, and tried to be brave. When Lyra accepted a proposal from a wealthy nobleman named Barrow from a far-off province, they packed what little they had and traveled to his estate. Barrow welcomed them with a smile, as did his daughter, Farah. Farah was unlike anyone Sella had ever seen, tall, graceful, with skin that glowed like gold and eyes as sharp as diamonds. But instead of jealousy, Sella felt awe. "You're very kind to us," she said softly during their tour of the grand mansion. "You're family now," Farah replied, taking her hand. That night, as Sella unpacked in a room filled with velvet curtains and jeweled mirrors, she whispered to herself, "Maybe, just maybe, this is the start of my new life." The wedding between Barrow and Lyra was held in the mansion's garden. Gold candles lined the stone path, and musicians played sweet music under the setting sun. Sella wore a borrowed green dress that made her feel almost pretty. Farah stood beside her in silver silk, smiling softly. Everything felt magical, until Barrow raised his glass for a toast. In the middle of his speech, he suddenly clutched his chest. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Then, in front of all the guests, he spat blood and collapsed onto the table. Screams filled the air. Farah dropped her glass and ran to him, but it was too late. Barrow was gone. His death stunned everyone. The wedding turned into chaos. Over the next few days, Farah locked herself in her room. She refused to eat or speak to anyone except Sella. "You can come in," Farah whispered one morning through the door. Inside, the curtains were drawn. Farah sat on the floor, holding a faded picture of her late mother. Sella offered her a warm cup of chocolate. "You're not alone," she said gently. Farah looked up, her voice shaking. "We let you into this house only because of your mother's money. Don't forget that." The words hit like stones. Sella blinked, stunned. "I thought we were," but Farah turned away. Sella rushed to find her mother. "This family, they're broke, Mama. They needed us, not the other way around." But Lyra was too deep in her own panic to listen. "We sold everything for this," she cried. "No rich man will want a poor widow with 2 daughters." Sella offered to marry someone, anyone, to save them. But her mother looked at her with pity. "You're not beautiful enough," she whispered. That night, Sella sat alone by her mirror. She stared at her reflection in the dim light. Her teeth still had braces, her nose looked crooked, and her cheeks were pale and hollow. Her fingers touched the cold glass. "Why does beauty matter this much?" she whispered. Behind her, Gina tiptoed in. "Don't listen to Mama," she said. "You're the nicest person in the world." Sella smiled weakly but didn't answer. Meanwhile, Farah sat in front of her mother's old portrait, crying. "I don't want to be alone," she whispered. Just then, a white dove landed on the windowsill. It stared at her, calm and still. Farah took it as a sign, a whisper of comfort from beyond. The next morning, a royal letter arrived. The king had announced a grand ball, inviting every noble-born girl to meet Prince Darien. Both Farah and Sella received invitations. "This is your chance," Lyra told Sella. "But we need help." She called in a strange doctor from the shadows of the city. "Start with the braces," she ordered. The doctor yanked them off without warning. Sella cried out, but Lyra didn't flinch. "Beauty is pain," she said coldly. Then came the nose. The doctor held up a brochure of perfect noses. "Model 7, Lyra pointed. The doctor cracked the bone with one snap. Sella screamed as tears rolled down her face. In the corner, little Gina watched in horror. After the surgery, Sella wore a strange metal brace over her face, looking like a creature from a nightmare. "This will heal you," her mother said. "Now go rest." Days later, Sella and Farah were enrolled in the finest etiquette school in the kingdom. It sat on a hill surrounded by roses, its windows shining like glass. The school was strict. Girls had to wake at dawn, walk gracefully, speak softly, and never show anger. "Here, you will become noble ladies," said Mistress Vel, their head teacher. On the first day, the girls stood in a line. Sella took a spot near the front. Mistress Vel walked by, inspecting them like statues. When she reached Sella, she frowned. "What is this thing on your face?" she asked coldly. "Step back. To the end." The girls snickered. Sella moved to the back, her face burning with shame. She was placed with the girls no one noticed, the unseen. Meanwhile, Farah glided through the room like a swan. She was perfect in every way. She smiled when spoken to, curtsied like a dream, and received compliments at every turn. Sella tried to copy her, but it was never enough. Back at home, Lyra watched her daughter like a hawk. "Only lemon water for you," she said during dinner. Sella looked at the roasted chicken on the table but didn't argue. She drank the sour water in silence. Farah spoke up. "I want to bury my father properly," she said. "He deserves a funeral." But Lyra waved her off. "Not until after the ball." Farah stared in disbelief. "His body is still in the room. The smell is unbearable." "You can cry after your dance with the prince," Lyra said. Farah stood, trembling. "You are a monster." Farah stormed upstairs and locked herself inside the room where her father's body lay. The smell of death was thick in the air. Flies buzzed around the windows. She fell to her knees, holding his cold hand, weeping. Downstairs, Sella tried to focus on her lessons. She practiced walking with a book on her head and greeting imaginary royals. She poured her soul into each task. When the names for the royal performance were posted, she didn't expect much. But her name was at the very bottom. Her heart leapt. It was small, but it meant she was still in the running. Later, during class, Mistress Vel called on her. "Show us your dance." Sella stepped forward, nervous but determined. She danced with grace and purpose. When she finished, the room was quiet. Mistress Vel nodded. "You have talent," she admitted. "But your looks," she paused. "They ruin everything." Sella lowered her head. "I never wanted you here," the teacher said coldly. "Your mother paid to keep you in the program." Sella blinked. "What?" "If you want to stay, work harder than everyone." After class, Sella sat alone under a tree, tears falling. "I'll never be enough," she whispered. Then another teacher, Miss Lima, joined her. "You dance beautifully," she said. "Don't let anyone steal your light." Sella looked up. "No one will choose me." Miss Lima smiled. "You've already chosen yourself. That's the hardest part." She handed her a tiny wooden box. "This is for you. Remember, what matters is what's inside." That evening, Sella went riding with Gina through the nearby woods. They laughed, their worries forgotten for a while. As the sun dipped low, Sella stopped her horse. "I need you to promise me something," she said. Gina nodded. "Anything." Sella opened the small box. Inside was a tiny white egg. "It's a tapeworm egg," she whispered. Gina's eyes widened. "Sella, no. It'll help me stay thin. I can eat and not gain weight." Gina grabbed the reins. "That's dangerous. It could kill you." Sella looked away. "It's my only chance. After I marry Prince Darien, I'll take the antidote." "You're letting Mama destroy you," Gina said, voice shaking. "She doesn't care about us." But Sella turned away and swallowed the egg. "Just don't tell anyone." Angry and hurt, Gina rode off with both horses, leaving Sella alone in the woods. As the wind rustled the trees, she sat on a fallen log and stared at the sky. "This has to work," she whispered. At the mansion, Farah had her own secret. She often snuck out at night to meet Kai, the stable boy. He was kind, quiet, and smelled like hay and sunlight. One evening, she met him behind the stables. "They want me to marry the prince," she whispered. Kai frowned. But what about us? Farah touched his face gently. My heart belongs to you. But my life doesn't. They kissed in the shadows, their love brief but real. Meanwhile, back in the woods, Sella heard laughter. She crept closer and saw a group of men gathered around a fire. One of them stepped away to relieve himself. It was Prince Darien. Sella gasped, seeing more than she expected. She turned to leave, but snapped a twig. The men heard. Who's there? One shouted. Sella froze. The prince stepped forward, sneered at her face brace, and laughed. Not even if you were the last girl in the kingdom, he said. His friends laughed cruelly. Sella ran, humiliated, but strangely, she didn't cry. Instead, her obsession grew. Sella returned to the mansion with her mind spinning. As she passed the stables, she heard noises. Curious, she peeked through a crack. What she saw made her heart race. Farah and Kai, locked in a kiss. Shocked and burning with jealousy, Sella ran to her mother. Farah is sneaking around with the stable boy, she said. I saw them. Lyra's face darkened. Moments later, Kai was dragged from the grounds, beaten, and thrown into the street. You don't belong here, the guards told him. Farah was stripped of her rights and turned into a servant. You brought shame to this house, Lyra told her. Sella watched it all with a cold expression. Something inside her had changed. She no longer cared about kindness. Only winning. Months passed. Gina spent her days with the horses, avoiding her mother's gaze. Farah, now wearing rags, cleaned the very hall she once walked with pride. Sella, on the other hand, removed her facial brace and looked in the mirror. Her new nose was small and perfect. But that wasn't enough. She wanted more. Longer lashes, she said. Make me prettier. Lyra found the same doctor. This time, he was drunk. The nurse had one eye and shaky hands. Sella was sedated, and the procedure began. Needle by needle, lashes were sewn into her eyelids. She screamed in her sleep. When she woke, her eyes were bandaged and burning. Late one night, Sella stumbled to the kitchen, blindfolded and starving. The tapeworm inside her screamed for food. She knocked over a pot. Farah, hearing the noise, rushed in. What happened? Sella collapsed. I'm hungry. Farah helped her sit. She brought her warm soup and fed her spoon by spoon. Why are you helping me? Sella asked. Because once, you were kind, Farah whispered. Days passed. At school, the teachers searched for a new lead dancer. Farah was gone. They noticed Sella's transformation and offered her the part. Sella smiled. She finally had it all. Sella stood in front of the mirror wearing her new costume. It shimmered with silver threads and golden leaves, designed to capture the prince's eye. Her wig covered the clumps of hair she had started losing. Don't worry, you'll shine, her mother whispered, adjusting her corset tighter. When the designer arrived for final fittings, Farah was called in to assist. She walked slowly, her eyes dull, holding pins and fabric. The designer barely looked at her, until he did. Without warning, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. Sella froze. The room went silent, but no one moved. No one said anything. Not even Lyra. Farah quietly wiped her mouth and continued pinning the dress. Later that night, Lyra gave Sella a sedative to help her rest. Farah sat on the cold floor beside her father's decaying corpse, now crawling with worms. The stench was unbearable. But then, something strange happened. A soft glow lit the room, and the air shifted. Farah blinked. Her mother's ghost appeared, standing tall with sadness in her eyes. You were always stronger than you knew, she said softly. The worms on the body shimmered, lifted into the air, and began stitching together the torn pieces of Farah's old dress. Her shoes were transformed too. But remember, the ghost warned, at midnight, the magic ends. The night of the ball arrived. Sella stepped into the hall like a goddess, painted, polished, and perfected. Her dress hugged her frame like it had been stitched by stars. She stood tall beside her mother, head held high. Remember, be quiet. Be sweet. Be his prize, Lyra reminded her. At the palace, girls stood in rows like dolls, each hoping to catch the prince's attention. One by one, their names, heights, and ages were read aloud. But none of that mattered to the men in the room. Their eyes only moved for beauty. When it was Sella's turn, Mistress Vel grinned. "This is the result of discipline and sacrifice," she declared. Prince Darian's eyes narrowed with curiosity. He stepped forward, lifting her hand. "May I have this dance?" Sella's heart nearly stopped. She nodded silently. As they moved across the floor, the music swelled. For a moment, she believed this was it. Her dream, coming true. But halfway through their waltz, the palace doors burst open. A girl stepped in, glowing with mystery, dressed in silver light. Everyone turned. Even the prince. The room fell into hush. The prince let go of Sella's hand without a word. He walked across the ballroom, drawn like a moth to fire. "Who is she?" someone whispered. The girl curtsied. Sella recognized her instantly. It was Farah. Her hair was tied in a crown braid, her once torn dress now a masterpiece. Her shoes sparkled with an unnatural glow. Prince Darian extended his hand, enchanted. Farah took it, and the orchestra played a new song. They danced like they'd known each other forever. Sella stood in the middle of the floor, her hands shaking. Murmurs circled her like flies. Lyra hissed from the edge of the room, "Fix your smile." But Sella couldn't. A sharp pain began twisting inside her. Her stomach churned violently. Something was wrong. Sella stumbled from the ballroom, clutching her side. She rushed into a corner behind the curtain and vomited violently. What spilled from her mouth were not just food or bile, but eggs. Tiny white tapeworm eggs. She gasped in horror. "What's happening to me?" she cried. Footsteps approached. Lyra appeared, her eyes fierce. "Don't fall apart now," she snapped. "Wipe your face and go back out there." "I'm sick," Sella sobbed. "I'm dying." Lyra ignored her and reapplied her lipstick with a napkin. "You don't stop until you win," she said, slapping her daughter's cheek lightly. "Now go." Dizzy and heartbroken, Sella returned to the ballroom. The lights blurred. Everyone looked strange, like insects with glowing eyes. She hallucinated. She saw worms on dresses, bugs crawling on faces. Then she saw the prince, still dancing with Farah. It clicked in her mind. He wants her now. The clock began to strike midnight. 1, 2. Farah looked up at the grand clock. "I have to go," she whispered to the prince. "Wait, who are you?" he asked. But she didn't answer. She slipped from his arms and ran across the ballroom. Guests gasped. The prince followed, calling after her. One of her shoes fell off on the stairs. She didn't stop. She disappeared into the night. Prince Darian picked up the shoe and held it high. "I will marry the girl this slipper fits," he declared. The crowd erupted in excitement. Sella, back in the shadows, bit her lip so hard it bled. Sella stormed home before anyone else. She knew. She had to act.